Right, let's take a look at some crime and punishment. We're in part 2, chapter 2. The murder happened at the end of part 1. And then he goes to the police station. Raskolnikov goes off to the police station, and that was chapter 1. And now he's left the police station, and I'm going to just read you through what I've written for this week's chapter analysis, right? Which you can check out and subscribe to if you would like to over at camscampbellreads.substack.com. Right. Raskolnikov is worried. He's just left the police station, having become quite ill upon overhearing the police officers discussing the murder after his questioning about his debt to his landlady. He goes straight home and pulls out the stolen goods from the hole in the wall and stuffs them into his pocket. He's panicking and wants to get rid of the evidence as quickly as possible. He ponders the river and the canal, and even goes to the islands, whereupon he stumbles on an abandoned courtyard with building materials lying around. There's a sign on the fence bearing an interesting inscription written in chalk. I'll cover that in the translation points below. He buries the loot under a large stone block and is then overcome with a barely containable feeling of joy, and he burst out laughing. So that's in quotation marks. Manic laughter? Relief? What do you think? At this point we get another temporal shift. Quotes. Yes, he was to remember that laugh later. A nervous, shallow, noiseless laugh that continued uninterrupted as he crossed the square. End quotes. Now we get inside Raskolnikov's head as he wonders why he didn't even look in the purse. What about this grand gesture of stepping over for the benefit of mankind? He's not even looked at the stolen goods and almost threw them into the canal. Quotes. It's all because I'm so ill, he eventually concluded morosely. I have exhausted myself, torn myself to shreds. End quotes. Does this mean that his constitution simply isn't strong enough to see his plan through? He's done the murder, as if led by fate, but now the consequences are making him ill. He's not a great man, after all. But we knew that, didn't we? How could Raskolnikov not see it? Delusion? We're reminded now of his mental state when he met Marmeladov in the tavern, when his glorious desire for human connection was snuffed out in an instant. Quotes. With each passing moment, he found he was becoming more and more consumed by a new overpowering sensation, a seemingly uninterrupted physical revulsion for everything he came across and all his surroundings, a persistent, spiteful feeling of loathing. He found everyone he met vile, their faces, the way they walked, every movement they made, everything was vile about them. Had anyone started talking to him, he would have spat at them, maybe even bitten them. End quotes. That's a pretty rough state to be in. It sounds like untreated mental illness, doesn't it? That's the feeling I get anyway. He finds himself at Razumikhin's without really remembering how he got there, and goes up to his door. Razumikhin seems pleased to see him and comments on how ill Raskolnikov looks. He offers him some translation work and he takes it at first, but then returns and leaves without a word. Razumikhin is a bit taken aback by his strange behaviour. Once back on the street, he's whipped by a passing coachman for walking in the middle of the road and almost getting run over. A passing elderly woman and a younger woman, presumably her daughter, mistake him for a beggar and give him 20 kopecks. He finds himself looking out over a view that's described in quite poetic language for Dostoevsky, but only so that he can later tell us that this view, which used to charm Raskolnikov on his way home from classes, now left him cold. Quotes. There wasn't a cloud to be seen in the sky, and the water was almost blue, which is very rare for the Neva. Glittering in the sunlight was the cupola of the cathedral, whose outline can never be so clearly seen as from this particular vantage point, standing on the bridge about 20 paces from the chapel. Every one of its ornaments stood out clearly in the pure air. The pain from the whip had eased, and Raskolnikov had already forgotten about it. A certain rather alarming but not absolutely clear thought was totally occupying his mind at the moment. He stood there for a long time, looking intently into the distance. He was particularly familiar with the spot where he was standing. When still at university, more often than not, while on his way home, he would stand precisely here, perhaps hundreds of times, staring intently at this truly magnificent view, each time marvelling at the vague, rather mysterious impression it made on him. As a view, it left him inexplicably cold. The gorgeous scene filled him with a blank, numb sensation. Each time he found himself astonished at his rather depressing and enigmatic reaction. Not trusting himself, however, he kept putting off trying to understand the reason for it until later. He recalled these memories and uncertainties with extreme vividness, and he felt it was no accident they were coming back to him now. It struck him as being very strange and eerie that he had stopped precisely on the very same spot, as though he actually imagined he could think the same thoughts as he had before. End quotes. It's really quite a powerful scene that illustrates the Raskolnikov of before and after. Another split in his character, with the murders being the point of the split, or Raskol. He throws the coin into the river, and then we get this chilling line. Open quotes. He felt as if at that moment he had taken a pair of scissors and cut himself off from everybody and everything. End quotes. He gets home and sinks into oblivion. He's awoken by a scream. At this point, we don't know he's dreaming. It's the sound of his landladies being beaten out on the stairs by Ilya Petrovich. Nastasia comes in with the soup, and he questions her about the beating. She tells him there was no beating, and that it's the blood. Open quotes. Nobody came. It's the blood singing in your ears. When it's got no way out, it starts coagulating, like in your insides, and you begin to see things. How about a bite to eat then? End quotes. He asks for a drink, takes a sip, and then sinks once more into oblivion. It's a powerful chapter that moves the story along quickly. We follow his panicked attempts at hiding the evidence. We're introduced to Razumikhin, whom we've heard about but not met. There's the before and after scene, with the views over the river as a plot device. Then the paranoia and delirium take over to the point of unconsciousness. A great man, he is not. And then we move on to some translation points. I've chosen one here as an example, but there are others that you can go and look at. So, stopping of carts here strictly forbidden. This is a super interesting piece of translation, how to deal with Russian that's deliberately misspelt. The original text is written in chalk on the fence. Здесь становится воспрещено. The example given above is how Roger Cockrell rendered it, also choosing to use all caps. I'm not entirely sure where he got carts from, but he wasn't the only translator to do that. Macduff has a very similar translation. Stopping of carts prohibited, and the word prohibited is misspelt. So I won't read the rest of them out because they're all misspellings and it's more interesting if you go and look at it rather than have me read it. And as I say, there are other translation points from this chapter that I've included in my translation comparison spreadsheet, to which there is a link in the post. Of course, there is a link to the post in the description, so you can go and read that and then you'll get all the goodness. And it might inspire you to join. That would be good. So we're only, 9 chapters deep into the novel, which is not lots. And we're reading 1 chapter a week, which is not lots. So you'll be able to catch up in a couple of days and then carry on reading with us a chapter a week. And you can get these analyses and join in the conversation on Substack. All right. Thanks for watching. See you later.